All right, council, we're live. I'm going to call the June 23rd regular council meeting to order. And as usual, the first order of business on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I have been notified that business item 5B did not have the attached policy. So we're being asked to defer 5B from tonight's agenda to allow that to be added, and then we'll talk about that at a future meeting. So I need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please. Councillor Reid.
I'll move the agenda be approved as amended.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of that motion? That carries. Same for the adoption of the minutes of our previous meeting and public hearing. Councillor Flowers.
I move to adopt the minutes from June 23rd for the regular council meeting and the public hearing.
All right, no commentary. Call the question. All in favor? Also carries. Thank you. We have no delegations tonight. As usual, we do have a number of business items, starting with 5A, Francophone Secondary School Site. Mr. Krasinski making his way to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Thank you for having me here today for our presentation and report on a request for a letter of support for a proposed Francophone Secondary School Site in Cochrane. To begin this presentation, we want to do a little bit of level setting as a quick reminder to Council and members of the public of what our request is. This is really a request for a letter of support that will enable the Franco-Sud School Board to request the funding that they require to complete any required studies and a development permit application to submit it to administration for review and consideration. And a reminder that this is not an approval of a development permit application or land use for the site, and it is not based on an approved design, and any sort of designs contained in the report and the presentation are purely contextual, but have not been developed or refined based on any feedback from the public at this time, as additional funding will be required in order to advance that through the design stage and complete any feasibility studies. The next step is to go through the school site status report recap. So as we heard requested by Councillor Wilson at the public hearing last week, we thought we would do a quick recap on the school site status report. It's a high-level overview, which was included in the report package for all of Council as well. One of the main slides from that presentation we wanted to highlight was the priority list of shovel-ready school sites. This is prioritized based on the order in which they are likely to come forward in timing to provide additional infrastructure in the community to address a capacity gap where we're seeing high schools and other schools across the school boards reach capacity within their existing buildings. Starting with 1 and 2 here, we have Bow Valley High School, which is currently under construction, and we'll speak a little bit more about the current status and how this has evolved from January and some future slides. But of course, Bow Valley High School is currently undergoing renovation. Rivercrest School, that we're currently in the process of reviewing a development permit application for. Franco-Sud, which was identified on January 6th, is the third priority on here, which was due to its ranking as the top priority in the 3-year capital plan for the school board. And then the Heartland School and Horse Creek School, which I'm happy to report have actually increased in the 2026 3-year capital plan from Rocky View School Board from 4th and 5th respectively to 1st and 2nd on their priority list for their 3-year capital plan. The other sites identified here, looking at 6 through 10, are really sites that require significant additional work in order to get to the point where they can come forward, even to be included on a 3-year capital plan. Not included on capital plans currently, and the sites are not created or ready to move forward to be included in identification to be likely to achieve funding. So again, there's the Francophone School identified. The other slide we really wanted to draw attention to again for Council is the school building timeline. So as we identified back in January, once a school is identified on a 3-year capital plan, the next phase is to move on to design drawings, then development permit and building permit applications, with any P3 contractor procurement happening in parallel with administration's involvement in the development permit and building permit review and approval stage, following by construction once the P3 contract, which is a private-public partnership procurement contract, is approved and the development permit and building permit have been approved, which leads to an approximate 2.5-year construction timeline. What this means practically is it's about 4 to 7 years for the construction of a school, depending on where it sits on a 3-year capital plan, once it is on a 3-year capital plan for the school board. So we are currently at the design drawings phase with the high school, the secondary school for Franco-Sud being the top priority in their 3-year capital plan for their region. And this is a new slide that we put together just as a bit of an update on the status and the potential contribution of the school if council provides support for it to move forward to request funding for the design to be considered for a development permit review application. And that is, again, to highlight a few things on this slide. You can see the Bow Valley High School with the renovations. This really identifies a timeline, really, of the planned projected future school sites coming forward in the community to address the current infrastructure gap and capacity issues at some of the both elementary, secondary schools within Cochrane. So the Bow Valley High School here we have identified as to be confirmed. We confirmed that earlier today. Is adding approximately 500 students to the renovations once complete. But the moral of the story here on this slide is really to identify the plan in place with providing additional capacity in 25 and 26 through the Bow Valley High School expansion, additional capacity with Rivercrest School in 28-29, the new opportunity before you today to enable to advance forward of additional capacity of 275 students in 29-30, and then the existing opportunities in Rocky View School Board, which we identified previously, have been increased in priority, no longer 5th and 6th, but 1st and 2nd now, in Heartland and Horse Creek School, along with the number of students. So revising that total with the 500 students from Bow Valley School following the renovations would be up to about 3,855 additional student room across these schools by 2033. Now we're going to look at the Franco-Sud School development timeline and where we are. This is a bit of a recap of some information council has seen as well. So the first step, as identified, was this being listed in the capital plan for Franco-Sud. It was identified as tied for the highest priority in the 24 to 27 capital plan, and since elevated again in the 25 to 28 capital plan to the standalone top priority, with a school in Canmore being second. Site identification is a requirement as well for us to move forward, as we've completed some reviews and additional reviews following the public hearing. There is a requirement to identify a site in order to have a high likelihood of success in accessing funding from the Alberta government and the school boards, or sorry, from Alberta Education. What you'll see here is we've kind of color-coded this as well, so the blue identifies the roles and responsibilities of Franco-Sud, with yellow representing Cochrane's involvement, and then the provincial involvement identified in red throughout the process. When we brought this forward in April for council for a committee of the whole and a regular council meeting, there was a request by council for additional engagement with the community. Following that, Franco-Sud held an open house with members of the community and anyone else in Cochrane interested in attending on June 2nd at École Notre-Dame-de-Vallée. And that was followed up by the public engagement session that you were all here for last week. The public hearing. So that's where we are right now, requesting a council decision on providing that letter of support. If approved, then they would move forward with submitting the request for provincial funding for design and construction through the province, along with that letter of support. And if received, they've committed to complete additional public engagement. And the nature of that would be determined, I think, at that time. But I think there's a large willingness of Franco-Sud to complete any level of engagement that would be requested of council through that process to inform the design and then vet that design back with the community as part of the development permit application process. Administration would then review the development permit application, as you can see there, number 8 in yellow, and incorporate all the feedback that we had heard both through the original open house, the public hearing, and additional feedback we heard from council today, into a final decision by the development authority on development permit for that school. And that would lead to provincial funding for construction, which you can provide all at once or in 2 phases. And then finally, leveraging that provincial funding for construction and the P3 partnership they enter into transitioning into a school opening on the timelines identified earlier. So public hearing summary, moving forward. At the public hearing that we heard last week, summary of the public feedback, we heard from 14 members of the public in opposition to providing a letter of support for Franco-Sud. subject to a development permit application and construction funding provided by the province is 2 caveats to that letter. A summary of the concerns are that it would result in a reduction in open space. There would be a visual and potentially privacy impact to existing residents located to the west. There would be a reduction, a perceived reduction in property value, and that there weren't significantly enough alternate sites considered, as well as traffic and parking concerns were the main themes that we heard from the members of the public who spoke in opposition. We also heard from 21 members of the public who came out and spoke in favor of providing a letter of support for a school located at this site. And some of the main themes there mentioned by those who came to speak for it were shared facilities. I think this provides value for land optimization, as we heard them speak to before, and reduces potential nuisance on the community as a whole of Cochrane through a reduction in the amount of buses and infrastructure that would be required to service the site. It also helps support their vision of providing the community that they're trying to build and in the ability to transition from one school to another while remaining in place, and having those shared facilities of fields between the schools, and also, of course, we mentioned that the support from the Rocky View School Board for that shared use by Midford School as well. They also spoke to additional amenities, not just to address some of the concerns in equitable access that Franco Sud identified last week, but also for Greater Cochrane as a whole, through the provision of some programmable hard courts, indoors that could be used for basketball and volleyball, potential theater space that could be used to support that need in the community, as well as an enhancement to the recreational amenities, both outdoors as well, both the fields and outdoor basketball courts that could be provided through this as well. The site was also shovel-ready with the appropriate zoning and land use in place, which would reduce any delays resulting from identification of an alternate site, and it increases its likelihood of funding from the provincial government in order to help address the infrastructure gap in Cochrane related to school sites. And would free up lands for other schools. As we identify other alternative schools beyond what we currently looked at, we'd have to start looking at schools that may be already identified by other school boards or have not been identified as school sites with the appropriate land use, which could obstruct and delay the provision of schools for those other school boards. Additional feedback that was heard was that it addresses an urgent need for Franco Sud, which I've spoken to. I think we're all familiar with what they mentioned last week about the non-optimal situation that they are dealing with currently, having one amongst many high school age students sharing bathrooms with elementary school students in the type of classroom environment, and the restriction from access to a lot of extracurricular and school programming that we've become accustomed to in most schools. Lower impact than alternate sites, that's speaking again to the ability to have shared facilities of bus lay-by, shared parking, and shared busing. Of course, they mentioned there may be the need to enhance the size of the bus and buy larger buses. And the optimization of land utilization. Speaking a little bit to this from my former career with larger municipalities, as municipalities grow, the demands on municipal land are ever increasing, and the need to efficiently use the available municipal land to maximize the amount of services we provide is ever increasing. This is a great opportunity to demonstrate co-location between uses that are not just relatively similar, but very similar, possibly identical, on a similar site to reduce the total impact of having separate sites. And then it creates capacity in all schools by reducing the number of students that would transition out of Franco-École de Vallée to other schools, either the Rocky View School Division or Calgary Catholic School Board, and possibly contribute to the additional strain that those school boards are feeling, so it would reduce the impact over time. So at that public hearing, we also heard a number of questions from council that we had committed to follow up with council at this regular meeting of council. So can increased setbacks be accommodated and still fit a school site on the site? I asked our senior planner who's been working on this file to have a look at that, and we believe there is actually an opportunity to increase the setbacks even further. To that end, of course, as I mentioned a week ago, this really relies on the funding to have the detailed studies and a design so that we can have a discussion based on a potential design. But when we look at a 50,000 square foot footprint, which I think leads in one of the next questions, we believe that there is sufficient area to accommodate an even larger setback if required. Are there strategies to minimize street parking impacts around the school? Yes, there are. As mentioned at the previous public hearing, There are things like shared parking agreements that could be explored, as well as parking restrictions if there was a desire for the municipality to go down that road. Of course, I understand that that would be a new step this municipality has not taken before, but I believe there are opportunities, even staggering start times of schools, staggering special events, like the parent-teacher interviews that Councillor Nagel spoke to last week, as well as sporting events and graduations. What is the square footage of the proposed school and how long until capacity is reached? So the question we received from Councillor McFadden. 50,000 square feet, to confirm, is the footprint they're looking at right now. Of course, there are opportunities as they advance the design to look at adjusting that footprint in response to any feedback and concerns that they hear from the public and council. So that is, I believe, open to be explored. There's lots of different opportunities you could look at, but 50,000 is what they're looking for. And then 7 to 10 years after construction, of course, construction, we were looking at, I believe it was 2029. So 7 to 10 years from 2029 to 2030, 2036 to 2040 is when this facility would look to be at capacity, is the information we have from Franco Sud. Is there sufficient emergency access for West Valley and West Terrace? Again, we reviewed this, and there's a bit of a rule of 3 when this comes up of a need for 3 access points, either 2 public accesses and 1 emergency access, or 1 public access and 2 emergency accesses. And in the case of this community, West Valley, West Terrace, there are 2 public accesses and 1 emergency access off of Horse Creek Road when required through coordination with CPKC as well. And then could Franco Sud access provincial pre-funding to support this project with all the support from the municipality for their preferred site? We've followed up through a number of different venues, including our Strategic Services Department, and we're unable to verify the information that we heard from the member of the public, that this information would be available with identification of the school site. Based on their and our re-review of the materials, there's a standard that needs to be met of us identifying a site before we would be successful in accessing pre-funding for Franco Sud to be able to complete their studies. Of course, we're not sure where that information came from, but we were unable to identify that source and have been unable to receive the same information since the public hearing. So the answer to that was no. And did the potential always exist for a school site to be built on this site? So the answer to this is yes. So we looked at this in the land use in place for this site. Essentially, there's a long series of history we could go down of the parent parcel and then how many times it was subdivided. But effectively, since 1992, this parcel has had, the original parcel, has had this land use in place. And then as it was subsequently subdivided off, the original parcel would have been 136 Quigley Drive, which is the subject parcel we're talking about. And subdivided out of it was the location of the school, 132 Quigley Drive, in 2012. And so 1996 is when that half would have been there, but at the time that this community is approved, it would look like one big block of schools, not identifying the total number of schools on it, but identifying the area of the school, the area that they would take up. So integration and feedback, just speaking a little bit to what we've heard and how it could be addressed moving through the application, so and some of the stuff we had at public hearing. So capacity, again, creates capacity for all schools and alleviates urgent need for Franco Sud and provides a reduction in the, we'll say, the demand on other schools by retaining students within Franco Sud. Land optimization, again, the efficient use of land through co-location of amenities and services and providing an opportunity for additional school site that was not previously identified. Open space impact, optimization and enhancement of open space amenities. We acknowledge that there will be obviously a 50,000 square foot reduction in the size of open space available at the site, which would be offset by an investment in enhancing the quality of that open space by providing additional amenities such as, again, outdoor basketball nets, improved fields for soccer, and then the additional amenities indoors through basketball courts, volleyball courts, and then theater space that the school has been discussing in there. Property values, I've reached out to my network of certified appraisers as well as Alberta Municipal Appraisal Association, and without knowing the design of the school, which a letter of support is required, it's really difficult and more of a guess as to what the real impact of property value would be without knowing where or what the impact potentially may be on the site, acknowledging that there's both positive and negative impacts to property values in the community and adjacent owners from a potential school site on the property. Privacy and visual impact mitigated through school site design at the development permit stage. So we've heard all the feedback from the community. We'd be happy to hear additional feedback as Franco Sud moves forward through the development permit application if they receive the letter of support and funding from the provincial government to incorporate that into the development permit and guide that process through to ensure that concerns are being effectively addressed. Traffic and parking. There's, again, I spoke to opportunities for shared parking agreements and restriction if needed. Of course, before we look to develop a solution to the problem, we would want to look at traffic impact assessments and parking studies in order to quantify what extent the problem really is and identify what mitigation tactic would be most appropriate in identifying it. In all of these situations, administration is available, to, of course, to consult and assist, but really the responsibility for demonstrating how they're responding to these and identifying a solution to any potential problem resulting from the study is the applicant's responsibility. So we would help assist them and guide them, but we would look to Franco Sud, working with whatever the consultants they retained, to identify alternatives for consideration. And value proposition. So to summarize, we see this as addressing an educational institutional asset need in Cochrane, identified previously on January 6th, that it will provide additional enhanced community amenities, of course, acknowledging the reduction in open space, but improved higher quality open space. And then connectivity, there's an opportunity for a slight increase in connectivity as there's been discussions about the potential for a pathway to be located within the setback area, which would help address a currently in progress discussion about a pathway gap connection along Quigley Drive connecting to the west side of our community. So again, in summary, we want to just kind of both to bookend this with what this is and what this isn't. This is not council approval for any design or council approval of a development permit for this property. Rather, it is a letter of support that will enable us to pursue a unique alternative to provide an additional school site for this community that was previously unidentified, and hopefully help address a need for school sites in the community. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I just want to start off by saying I really appreciate the level of detail administration has gone into in the response to this public hearing. I think it's next level in a response that really broke down everything we've talked about, everything we heard. Appreciate the way that you've presented that tonight, Mr. Krasinski. Thank you. Councillor Reid, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I appreciate your presentation and the mayor's summary. I think what a letter of support does say, and what it actually is a letter of support for the school. I think to cloak it in just in terms of anything else, I think is a fallacy. I think what's being proposed leaves much to be addressed at the development permit stage, and that isn't comforting for me, admittedly. After a considerable reflection and the opportunity to actually thoroughly walk the site, I must express my sincere appreciation for the need for an additional school space or educational space, as well as the importance of addressing the charter and cultural considerations. But with all due respect to those associated with the school and that board, based on the information I have to date, I don't believe that placing this really what is an infill school within a constrained keyhole site embedded in a long-standing, well-established residential community is not appropriate and not sustainable. I think that the administration needs to go back to the drawing board.
Councillor Flowers?
This is one of the toughest topics we've had to deal with on this council because there's so many people for it and so many people against it. A couple more questions I had. You did mention that it's possible to have a larger setback. Could it also be possible to put the lower part of the school near the houses and the gymnasium closer to the other school?
Through the mayor, Councillor Flowers, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things, cautioning, I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant here a little bit without confirmation with them, but I'm confident that they would be willing to consider those type of unique considerations in the design phase. And one of the things administration would look to mitigate the concerns identified by the public, ensuring that the one-story component of the facility would remain as close to the residents, not as close as they could, but on the west side with the second-story gym component located as far from the adjacent owners as possible.
It's those people along there that I'm most concerned about because it will really affect them. So the more we could do to help that, the better. I went through all my notes from the public hearing and all the letters we received. People are passionate both ways about this school going there. In the end, I believe that the need outweighs the concerns. Yes, there is lost green space, but there are benefits from fixing up the parking lot, having a gym accessible, and shared infrastructure such as gas, power, and water. The buses are already coming there 180 days a year, so they would be fuller than they were before. It avoids a lot of duplication, and the buses are already funded, so it would be good to use them to capacity. As I drove around West Valley, I was reminded there is a great deal of green space in this community, including the skate park and the dog parks and all that they have. Someone mentioned that the space is not really being taken away, it's being used in a different way, and I have to agree with this. We need schools. I'm in favor of this plan.
Councillor Fedayko?
First of all, I want to start off by thanking all the public for their engagement, whether you're on the for side or you're on the against side. Like Councillor Flowers stated, this has probably been one of the hardest ones to kind of wade through. However, I will not be endorsing the letter of support right now for the Francasude. It doesn't mean that I'm against a letter of support, period. I'm just not for supporting this particular land parcel. I believe that we've missed maybe some ongoing conversation that I think would help me to get there. However, when I asked the question about looking at portables perhaps to expand space, when I asked about, no different than the ongoing expansion at Bow Valley High School, who also is looking to expand their core site to be able to add more room. Then there was a whole topic of perhaps we just didn't look at all the land parcels available. I completely understand the Francasude's idea that they want to have their kids go to school from, I'm assuming daycare all the way to grade 12 at some point on the same land parcel. However, as a parent of 3 children, I can say many families in Cochrane have never had that opportunity. I guess unless you're Francasude, maybe you have that opportunity, but everybody else in the public or Catholic system has not. We get changed due to boundary designations all the time, and we have to move our kids who, grew up with their friends, have family in the same school, and now they have to go to different schools. It's just kind of a reality of where we are in the education system, as well as overcrowding in classrooms. My kids have also had to take, they don't get to do band because they have to have a class that's have to incur in the music room. Those things are all things that, as a parent, I've had to deal with having my kids in the regular school system. I would like administration to go back to the drawing board to take a look at other land parcels to explore the idea of putting portables on this particular site. I also walk the land, and I don't want to say it's a not my backyard situation, but I can understand the residents who live there. If I were to all of a sudden live in an area that, yes, we all know that it could be a school, it's not about the Francasude school, it's about any school. I would not want to look up and open up my door and see a brick wall facing me. I wouldn't. The land mass and overall was not designed in my mind to have 3 schools on it. It's not big enough, never mind the parking concerns, never mind the safety concerns, the list goes on and on. So for that, please go back to the drawing board. I would love to be able to endorse this, it's just not that particular site. Perhaps maybe a different site could be located where you could build an expanded footprint and have everybody in the same school all on one area. This is just not the right fit for me, as well as I agree with Councillor Reid. One of the biggest problems that I have is that once council endorses this, and if they get the go-ahead for funding and design, council then does not see the information that comes on the other side. Doesn't matter the traffic studies. We just have to hope and pray that everything's looked after, and that to me is not good enough. I think that we owe our residents more.
Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but first I did want to echo my appreciation to all the residents for the emails and the conversations and the engagement in being here tonight. So thank you very much for all of that. So a couple of questions for me. So it's a tight spot, and so one of the things that seems most reasonable to me would be, to add on to the existing school or portables, these type of conversations. But that's not feasible in this site because of the province's P3 funding model, is that the barrier?
Through the mayor, Councilor McFadden, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So, that's frustrating that it's just a provincial funding model that is keeping us from kind of doing the easiest thing. And then the next step of this, so if council were to endorse the letter of support, then would move to the provincial side of the equation, and then if they approved funding, it would just go to our development team for approval and to work through any concerns that they might have. So the short of that is, this would never come back to council for any direction about setbacks or any of those type of concerns or questions.
Through the mayor to Councilor McFadden, there's a bunch of nuance in there, I believe. I just want to clarify. One of them is a commitment by administration as well, that of course we're always willing to share any information on applications with council upon request. So we'd be more than willing to proactively consider this a request by council to share some of those studies to ensure that council was informed as the design was developed and the studies were received from the applicant. Another component of that we've had some initial conversations with, I'm sure you can imagine, the planning services team has been working quite busily on this to try and consider any permutations and of course not getting the cart in front of the horse at the same time. But I mean, if we start looking at reducing setback requirements to try and bring the new school as close as possible to the existing school, even limiting, and that's part of the increasing the setback even further from the western properties, possibly upwards of 25 meters were our initial kind of back of the envelope calculations there. We could look at doing that even further if we start looking at setbacks that exceed the variance allowable within the land use bylaw, at which point the application may have to go to Cochrane Planning Commission, which would then involve 2 members of council as well. So lots of opportunities, as well as the opportunity, of course, for council to participate in the additional open houses to help form and structure the design. Of course, administration serves at the purview of council as well, so always takes the direction of council under consideration. We'd also be willing to come back to a committee of the whole in the future in order to provide additional information once we have the detailed studies and the design for consideration.
Okay. And there's, so what I'm hearing from you is administration's commitment to, even though it's not part of the structure, to keep council informed and to do its absolute level best to engage and reflect the community's concerns and council's concerns as well.
Through the mayor, Councilor McFadden, that is correct. I think one of the things we would always strive to do, but particularly in this case, is minimize the impact to the to any of the concerns previously expressed as much as possible, both reasonably, financially, and feasibly, to ensure that we got to a point that would minimize any potential impact on adjacent owners. I want to kind of emphasize that administration is committed to not treating this as a win-lose opportunity, but try to reduce any potential loss as much as reasonably possible to address a critical concern.
Right, and there's no way for council to put direct control on this site. If we give this letter of support, it's pretty much passed into the process.
Through the mayor, Councilor McFadden, that's not an avenue that we have considered. I think it would just, it would be really tight for us to go down the road of looking at doing a land use amendment on the site and have everything prepared prior to our council freeze midway through September. So the short answer is not without introducing, at minimum, I would say probably a 6 to 12 month delay in advancing this opportunity for Franco-Sioux.
And do we think the province or the ministry would allow us to put direct control limitations on it?
Through the mayor, Councilor McFadden, that's not an alternative that frankly I've thought about till you proposed it, about whether they would allow it to. I believe that's within our purview to do our land use on the site, to add those additional restrictions. However, I think we can get to the same place without a direct control as well, responding to the studies and the concerns of the public, which are all in the public realm now, and I think we're all very well aware of.
Councillor McFadden, if I can too, I think one of the important things for council to realize is if this letter of support was provided, the province is going to do their own assessment of this site as well. So as part of their evaluation, they're going to be asking a series of critical questions on the viability of this site. And then certainly then if they approve the funding for this, then there would be a number of studies, which are all the answers that I think people are looking for. So whether it's the traffic impact assessment, there's been questions about stormwater. So that's certainly one of the things that we took into consideration with our evaluation as well.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's it for questions at this time.
Counselor Wilson?
Thank you. I had notes and opinions here right before that, until that last question was asked, and it did give me a little bit of food for thought. Originally, my take on this was simply that I disagree with administration right now. I'm not satisfied that there is sufficient space available at the proposed site. I agree with the dozens of local residents, households on this. However, of course, like others, I care about Franco Sud finding their future site at a more appropriate location. And so my first question that I had for administration, at least until that last conversation, is why not Horse Creek? What opportunities exist there? We just, as a community, paid $11 million for stripping and grading to get that site ready sooner than later. What does the Horse Creek site look like? Is that a possible opportunity for the school in the future?
Through the mayor to Councilor Wilson, some of the principles that we used in helping support Franco Sud in identifying a potential site was avoiding impacting existing sites that were currently used by another school board, as well as avoiding impact to sites that were planned by another school board. So we did look at sites, for example, like Heartland. However, that was denied by Rocky View School District, as that was quickly becoming their highest priority. With respect to Horse Creek Sports Park, I would look to possibly my colleague Drew Hyman to provide additional insight on it. However, I can confirm as well, we didn't want to bring forward, we brought forward a request for the preferred option in the preferred site by Franco Sud, that there was a preferred alternative, which is what we see before you as well. If this is not supported by council, I think the next steps would be to look at all alternatives, not limited to Horse Creek Sports Park or St. Tim's, but every potential opportunity of undeveloped land, 4.5 acres or larger within the community, that even if it doesn't have the appropriate land use, could go through a land use in order to provide the appropriate land use to change it. It's just that wouldn't help address the gap and capacity issues today. That would likely extend even beyond that 6 to 12 month process that we talked about, even for doing a control district.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, my only comments on Horse Creek is there's 30 acres that is intended to go to or that is owned by the Rocky View School Division. So that's on their list in terms of the high school. They don't need all 30 acres for the high school. Certainly that would be something that they would have to potentially explore opportunities on that 30 acres. In terms of the balance of the 125 acres that Cochrane owns, we are looking at opportunities for recreation. That's a growing need in our community, and I wouldn't want to change course in terms of that. But to complement the items that Mr. Krasinski said, if council wishes, we could explore all sites within our community, which is something that is available to us as well.
Okay, excellent. Just a few more, 2 more questions here, and then I'll just get to my quick opinion, and that's, you mentioned 2 public accesses earlier in the presentation. I count Quigley Drive, and what's the other one to the school site?
There's one just to the south. I'm just trying to bring up a community map image here for you. There's one other access. I don't have the name of the road on the tip of my tongue right now. I do apologize. But there's one just south of Quigley Drive as well. Same area of the community on the east side. So we're looking.
I believe he's referring through the chair to the access by the skate park area there, so south of the GM dealership as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It might be semantics, but in my mind, that all filters on to Quigley Drive, so that's just one access. However, I don't know that that's necessarily the one set or feature that kills this this whole decision in my mind. So what's interesting to me is what we just talked about, which was greatly decreasing setbacks and sending the proposal to CPC, which essentially means even if you can't add on to the current building, you're building a second building so close to the current one that it's almost like you're doing the portable thing. That's the kind of idea that gets me interested. The current proposal in front of me tonight isn't something that gets me interested. I don't think there's enough room on the site for it. And so I would probably petition council to go with option 2 here tonight, which is to send this back to administration and come back with us with either a alternative site somewhere in Cochrane that makes more sense than this one, or a new building proposal which makes more sense on this very limited site. Those are the two ideas that interest me tonight. But as it sits currently, I agree with the local residents on their opinion on this.
Through the mayor, Councilor Wilson, if I may, I think the option of going to CPC still exists through this. It's just we'd want that to follow an evidence-based, data-driven model based on the studies that we received through the application process and amendments to the design. It's really more just a commentary on the potential alternatives available to any applicant for any development permit.
Thank you for bringing that up. If I may, it does bring one other comment then, and that's the same as Councillor Fedeko, where she said, as soon as we endorse the letter of support, it sounds to me like council's ability to control what happens next is limited. We might get updates, but there's no control left. Is that correct? Or where is our next piece of control? Should we approve this letter tonight? If you have my opinion, which is the current proposal is untenable, either I'd need to see dramatic setback decreases and adding on to the current facility almost with a separate building, or a whole new site chosen. Where does our control still lie if we give the letter of support tonight?
Through the mayor, Councilor Wilson, administration would never want to approve anything without having endorsement and support with council for it. So I think, indirectly through having those conversations and touch points with council, we'd be incorporating that feedback into a development permit application process and decision at that time. So again, it'd be a commitment from administration not to be looking to diverge from council while also protecting a bit of the integrity of our current land use bylaw and not creating a wedge that reduces the delegated authority long-term on all applications, which enables the organization to work more efficiently over time as well.
If I may, sorry, Mr. Heineman, through the chair to Councillor Wilson, I think one of the elements here is that ultimately any letter of support from council is authored by council and can say whatever council would prefer it to say. And one of the considerations that was considered is moderating the letter of support to, say something as in an approval through the planning stage of the process, which is still an option. I think the evaluation that was made there is that in the incredibly competitive space of communities seeking school sites all across the province, there's really, really high need that any moderation of those sites may make the application unattractive to the province for funding as part of it. So I really just highlight this to the point that administration has certainly considered what those types of moderations on the letter would look like to give council additional touch points and those types of things, and determined that that would likely render the application quite ineffective at the provincial level. I just didn't want to leave that unidentified. And as well as I just sharing that, I would also just note as well that for clarity's sake, I just want all parties to be perfectly clear. And this is not an administratively driven exercise. This is being generated from our partners at the Franco Sud School Division, and administration is just supporting that process as best as we possibly can. In a perfect world, I would love the idea of being able to successfully access funding for the planning that would answer a lot of these questions. It feels like that's going to be a little bit difficult to do through the provincial process because of the great need everywhere. There's all kinds of projects that don't have those kind of limitations that would likely get funded ahead of this one.
Okay, well, it leaves me with I'll just communicate to the bench what my thoughts are and how we get there. I think it's somebody else's vehicle because I don't know the right answer. But the current proposal in front of us, I don't think is tenable in the current location. But if it were to come back to me with a building that's more disappear our own land use bylaw setbacks because it's essentially a school on a school, it's the same school. So why would we have dramatic setbacks needed? Let's figure out a creative solution there to get it on this site or find a whole new site. But as it currently sits, I'm not pleased with it and wouldn't vote for it. So I don't know if the bench has the idea of what the vehicle is to achieve that result, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Before maybe we go around the bench, I'll weigh in with my thoughts. Obviously, the need for schools is real in our community. That's not in question here tonight. Many of my colleagues have mentioned that. One of the things I was hoping to hear tonight, and I did have a conversation with our MLA around the relatively new funding mechanism for schools, pre-planning, design, and construction. two of those, the latter two, sit with infrastructure, and the first one with education. So I learned that, but it was still even unclear to MLA Guthrie where that threshold is. So it aligns with your presentation tonight, Mr. Krasinski, about it's an unknown whether the province would approve pre-planning so that we would have some of these questions answered. So for me, that leaves a huge gap, and I think we're potentially creating a future problem by endorsing a school here. And I think, to speak to your question, Councillor Wilson, around moving the school site further or closer to the existing, I think solves some of the issues, but for me, this really comes down to parking. I'm really concerned with parking in the neighborhood, and and I was kind of flipping back and forth in the public hearing between, okay, we're going to have these students on existing buses, but essentially and as someone who goes to public events, I struggle to park for a public event in that area at one of the schools currently. And I know those are one-offs, but they're real impacts on that neighborhood. And so for that reason, whether we change and go to a CPC or a really condensed offset, it doesn't address the parking concerns. And I think while this was a innovative way of looking to efficiently use land, I think the fact, and Councillor Reid, you kind of mentioned this in your comments about shoehorning in something, I think the impacts to the existing neighborhood is too great to take the risk on the next steps for me. So I'm not in favor of a letter of endorsement at this time. What I would like to do, and it's something you were mentioning, I think all of us would like to see, is continued conversation with administration, with Franco Sud, and potentially a partnership with another entity or even the town itself on a future piece of land that maybe even we own at this point that we could partner on and have a multi-use development there. I know that that's a longer time frame, but I really worry about the future concerns that we might be creating when that school is at full capacity in 10 years or 15 years. The events that would be driven there, whether it be sporting or Christmas concerts, etc. I think we're already trying to find innovative ways to mitigate parking, whether it be parking passes, and I just think we're going to have a whole lot of headaches. So I would rather see that on a future site or a different site. And with the understanding that the traffic that we're generating with a high school is going to have to go somewhere. So that wasn't lost on me in that public hearing either, that the increase in traffic has got to go somewhere in our community, and I really appreciate the resident that brought up we're talking about putting it in someone else's neighborhood, well, what about the impacts on that neighborhood? So again, I think I would rather be looking, and I know that that's a wish that we can't fulfill tonight, but in the absence of the information of how high, how close, how much traffic, I just don't feel comfortable in signing a letter of support for this at this time. And again, that's with a heavy heart because I know there's a need and we need to put this somewhere. So I think endorsing administration to go and help Franco Sud look for an alternate location is where I would land tonight. But open to suggestions, Councillor Reid or McFadden, if you have anything further to add.
Yeah, well, just a couple things. I was trying to find a mechanism to move forward, but I wanted to make comment to Mr. Hyman's due diligence comment about Alberta Ed. And this is not reflected at Drew, it's actually a reflection of Alberta Ed. So the comment was that Alberta Ed would do its due diligence in terms of this site. We actually know that there's a school that was built in this province when the province found out subsequently that the municipality didn't own the land, right? And so, to suggest that Alberta Ed does its due diligence really is a question in my mind. The other comment is, and I may have this wrong, and the mayor correct me, but in a meeting with Reeve Kissel today, the Reeve of Rocky View County, she suggested that what she heard was that new high schools would require 30 acres of land, which seems outrageous, but coming from the source, I wouldn't be surprised. So in moving forward, I'm trying to find a motion that would suggest that we refer this back to, I think it's option 2, Patrick? refer this back to administration for further work, and I don't know, did you make the motion, or are you?
I don't
Okay.
think there's actually a motion on the floor yet.
Okay, I would move option 2 then.
I'm just trying to find it in our notes here.
Do work on it more.
So, Councillor Reid, can you be more clear on what your motion would be? Refuses proposed transfer and directs administration to work, or?
Just as you said it. I propose that administration go back and work, looking at both the potential site with a revised diagram, or more appropriately, I think, look for an alternative site.
Mr. Mayor, the language you used was continued conversation and partnerships on other properties.
Yeah. Okay, so refuse and keep looking? Okay. Councillor McFadden.
So to the proposed motion, I support that. I was really trying to find a way to say yes to this, because we all win, our kids all win, if the sooner we can find school solutions. So I was really trying to find a way to get comfortable saying yes to this. And I just can't, because any of the securities, commitments, questions that we want to be able to answer for our residents, we just can't until the studies are done. So it just gets out of sequence to be able to give any security at all to the residents or to myself as a counselor on setbacks, parking, all those pieces. So yeah, I really wanted to get to a yes. I really want to work with Francophone Sud and find a solution for their students, and whether that's on another site or helping them partner with another school. We all win if we can find a way to get school sites, but I do support the motion on the floor, and to refuse proposed transfer and try to find another solution. But and I just want to say to all the proponents, I really appreciate your effort and your passion for this and your participation in the process. This one has been really a tough one to think through and to work through and try to come up with the best win for Cochrane.
Okay, everyone's clear. I'm just going to repeat the motion as I heard it. Councillor Reid, you're moving that council refuses the proposed transfer of land to Franco Sud and direct administration to continue work with Franco Sud on an alternate site. Yeah? Everyone's clear on that?
Did we get the revised building on the current plans?
I didn't hear that in there. Councillor Reid, did you want a? It's your motion.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Patrick, at this point.
You are comfortable or uncomfortable? Not comfortable, okay. So it's as I read.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear that currently we're not directing administration to possibly revise the current concept of the building. We're only telling them to go look at alternative sites. Is that what I
Yes.
understand? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's half what I was hoping for, so I'd probably vote against that, but it's better than option one, I'd agree.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Federico, I see your light there.
Yeah, I think the whole point is, I agree with what you're saying, just we still don't have the actual build design as it is. So we'd have to endorse it to be able to get to that point. So I think that's why you couldn't really add that in, because until we actually have the design, how can we alter the design, right? If that makes sense. We can't ask for the design without endorsing that site.
Councillor Wilson?
I have to come back not to add length to this, but we're throwing away a potential site, which is this current one, with this proposal saying that we reject this current site, and I'm saying, as it's currently proposed before us, I reject it. You come back with a better building solution on that site, I think it still might work. Right now, it doesn't work for me, and so that's why option one is a no to me, but I'd just recommend we continue to explore perhaps this site in case it could still be feasible, or all others. That's all I'm looking for. And I don't even know if administration needs this level of detail, but that's my instructions, and that's what I was looking for out of this conversation.
Maybe to just get some clarity, to be able to do what Councillor Wilson's doing is what Councillor Federico is suggesting. The path forward is endorse the site which then allows the pre-planning to get completed. So is there an A or a B, or is there a C?
Through the mayor, or to Councilor Wilson and to the mayor, I think what we're talking about in this situation is really if the funding were available to do additional design on the site, there may be an opportunity to consider it. I am hearing a little bit of different things from different members of council. Some are not interested in additional work on the site. I think we could always bring back a review of additional sites as a comparison to the existing site, which has already been done. If we don't support the existing site, however, then we would take that direction that council doesn't want to see a comparison to the existing site moving forward. So I think the option would be to consider evaluating additional alternatives, including a comparison to the existing site, and bring back additional information for council, which would allow us to do everything if that was supported by council.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McFadden.
So, I agree with Councillor Wilson. The motion I would be most comfortable with is to no to the letter, but to direct additional work for either on the site or on a new site. Because if we could come up with something that said, hey, we'll write you a letter, but we're gonna say the setback has to be X, I would be open to that. So I don't know if you're open to amending your motion or not, but I'd like the motion to be no, but to direct admin to explicitly tell admin to either keep working with the site to get to a comfort level or another site.
No, Councilor Reid is going to allow his motion to stand. I mean, I hear a couple of amendments being presented. I don't hear Councilor Reid picking them up, but if the motion fails, then I think there's an opportunity to put another motion on the floor. So that's how we would move forward. So to be clear, the motion on the floor is to refuse the transfer of land, so no letter of support, and direct administration to look at alternative sites. Yes? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? So that's a tie that fails. Oh, Councilor Nagel, one time. Okay, let's move on. Councilor Wilson.
I'll provide a new motion to help us along here, and that's simply the motion that was just on the floor with the added amendment to it that is administration also explores the current site with a different built form than we've currently received and leave all options available.
So no letter of support.
Correct.
Ask administration to compare new sites to this one.
With a whole new built form
New built form on this site.
that's been proposed, yes.
Okay. Questions on this? Councilor McFadden?
Yep, sorry, I'm getting lost in that one. So, sorry, Councillor Wilson, are you saying you just want a motion to look at a better built form on this site and other sites, or just on this site?
So I said everything that the former motion had, so
Right.
looking at other sites,
Okay.
but comparing it, but not throwing this site away just in case we can come to a better built form that makes sense for the local residents and the school users themselves. I
Okay,
don't think we hit the mark on this current proposal, so I'd like both options left on the table.
Okay, I think at the heart of it, I agree with you. I'm a little bit lost on the language, but I think at the heart of it, I agree with you.
Councilor Reid?
Yeah, obviously I'm going to speak up against the motion. I think what's not being taken into consideration is the issue that the mayor clearly pointed out and has and will continue to be a problem, is parking. There's nothing you can do in terms of design of that building to address that issue. That's why I'm going to vote against it.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, I think one of the challenges with this as well is even if we evaluate the existing site and look at building orientation, administration can only take that so far. It is the responsibility of the applicant, and then we will be in the same situation we're currently in, where we're trying to get additional funding to confirm and do additional studies. So I think, again, I appreciate the revision in terms of what you're proposing. However, I think if council, and I've heard from council tonight that perhaps looking at alternative locations would be a more suitable option.
If I may just add to that or moderate that, I think it does leave the option available to the Franco-Sud School Division to fund those processes themselves. They don't need to go to Alberta, the province, for funding, and so I don't think there's any harm in leaving that available. I think what I'm hearing in the motion is to create the most flexibility possible to attempt to address the needs of the school division, as well as be sensitive to the concerns of the resident. I agree the site is constrained. That's going to be incredibly challenging. And if the school division wasn't willing to expend resources, I think that's unlikely that we would see anything further on that site, but it does just leave that open. At least that's my take from the intent of the motion.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Derrick. You just hit it on the head. That's exactly my intent, what you just said there. And I'm also trying to incorporate what Councillor McFadden had said earlier about at this point, we just don't have enough answers to approve a letter of support for this. But should some of these questions be answered in a better format, perhaps I'd be willing to change my opinion. So I just wanted to leave all options on the table, including the current land being evaluated in front of us.
Okay, I'll weigh in. I just echo what Councillor Reid has said, that it doesn't take away the impact on the existing neighborhood for me. I think, again, the site is too small, and I would like to give confidence to the neighborhood tonight that we're not pursuing this site. That's where I'm landing, and it's not because we don't need the school. I think we're all trying to find a way to get a school built. It's just not there. So I won't be supporting the motion, but I hope we don't land in another tie and we have to go through another iteration of this. But Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, I think my greatest fear is that we will just end up going another tie on this. We could just cut to the chase. I mean, because if we just refuse the proposed transfer of town land for option 2 as is, everybody's going to, we're not going to stop. We all know that we're going to continue to work with Francophone Sud. So why don't we drop the motion that's going to cause confusion, and the part that we all do agree is we're not going to give you the letter of support. So if we just vote on option 2, simple without further direction, we'll probably break our 3-3 deadlock. Because at the heart of it, that's where we all do agree.
The one thing I would add is that one of the, I think the annoying things is that and this might be out of our control, but the province won't allow an addition to the school. So by defeating and not endorsing the letter, it puts more pressure on that system. Hopefully that the province can take a look at that, but maybe that's been pursued by Franco-Sud already. But anyways, so your motion is to have another look at this site, leave it open, and ask administration to identify it or compare it to other sites. Absolutely. Okay. Don't see any other lights on. I'll call the question. All those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? That's defeated. So we need a motion to, Councillor McFadden, maybe where you landed?
I'm going to move option 2.
Council refuses the proposed transfer of town land to Franco-Sud.
Yes.
Okay. Call that question. All in favor of that? Those opposed? That carries. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was 5A. New 5B is engineering design for siphon replacement at Calling Horse Creek. Mr. Tooth.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll be presenting how we're moving forward with the wastewater pipeline twinning project. We'll focus on how the immediate priority, the siphon replacement, fits into our long-term infrastructure strategy. The existing siphon at the Calling Horse Creek is currently operating beyond its safe pressure limits. This is our most urgent vulnerability. and it must be addressed immediately to maintain operational integrity. We're recommending the council approve a budget of $150,000 to fund the detailed engineering design for replacing the siphon. This investment ensures we can move quickly and effectively on construction when ready. This new segment is sized to integrate with full Phase 1 design, allowing us to isolate the original line until redundancy is needed. This is both a short-term fix and a long-term enabler. Addressing this need now not only mitigates the immediate risk, but it also positions us for successful negotiations with EPCOR and Rocky View County. Additionally, it will provide much-needed. This request is manageable within our existing reserves and aligns with our financial stewardship strategy, using reserves to handle immediate needs while planning for larger capital efforts through phased funding. With your approval tonight, we will begin design immediately. This will let us keep pace with regional timelines and maintain control of our infrastructure agenda. We'll return during regular budget deliberations with a cost for construction. Thank you for your time this evening. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Tooth. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I'll move that option 1, that council approve the use of $150,000 for the funding of the capital wastewater reserve for engineering design for the siphon replacement at Calling Horse Creek. I didn't know it was Calling Creek. Can you go back to your third slide, I
Yeah,
think
for
it
sure.
is? That one, sorry.
Oh, this one?
That one, yeah.
Yep.
I think the phrase at the bottom of that really captures what this project does, right? I think it's smart phasing, low risk, and
Stronger outcomes.
Yeah. I don't know who that quote was, but I think that's bang on, so thank you.
Was that your quote?
No.
Councillor Padeco?
I was just curious, does Rocky View County, are they also contributing towards the design of this? Like, are they contributing money as well, or is this coming from just us?
I gave a little bit of detail 3 weeks ago at a session with council, and I absolutely want to answer your question, but would it be okay if I were to send an email or some description on how they might contribute with that? It has to do with the negotiations that we're having with EPCOR in the Harmony franchise area. I don't want to give away our position, I guess I could say.
Mr. Tooth, if I may through the chair, would it be fair to say that that is a cost that could be recouped as part of the funding arrangement that was made in the future?
Potentially, yes.
Perhaps a connection fee or something like that?
That is a potential way that we could go.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe just further to that, this is our infrastructure.
Yes.
So it would be something that we're designing to upgrade and looking to the future to have other partners potentially connect to and maybe share costs in the future on. So this is just a step 1 in that multi-step phase.
Agreed. So I'll expand on it a little bit further. This pipe that I'm addressing right now is our existing infrastructure. And so that's why I'm in front of you now asking for budget, because the budget that was approved, the budget process was for twinning the pipeline for new infrastructure using growth funds, whereas this is an existing piece of infrastructure that should be funded by our ratepayers.
Yeah.
And if I may, just to clarify that even further, needs to be addressed independent of whether or not any other municipality or partner is involved in the project.
Yeah, I just think that's a very good way of separating the two, because I think that that's where we get caught up that maybe it's a future thing we could be charging for, but if it's our infrastructure, as you've outlined, I think it's a good separation. Okay, no other questions? Call the question, all in favor? That carries unanimously, thank you.
Thank you.
The new 5C, pet licensing. Mr. Juden?
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and councillors. At the April 28th, 2025 regular council meeting, Councillor McFadden introduced a notice of motion that council direct administration to prepare a report on the implications of removing the requirement for pet licensing for dogs and cats in Cochrane. Also proposing the idea that dogs and cats wear visible identification instead. Currently, under Animal Bylaw 04/2016, all dogs and cats within town limits must be licensed. In 2024, Cochrane registered a total of 4,515 dogs and 1,063 cats. Eliminating animal licensing would be a rather straightforward task, requiring current bylaw amendments and implementing a subsequent public information and education campaign. There are both advantages and disadvantages to eliminating pet licensing. Advantages include the cost savings realized through less processing of applications, maintaining databases, and mailing renewal notices with staff resources being able to be reallocated to other priorities. Pet owners would save the cost of a license. Reunification may be faster, with the finder of an animal being able to call the owner immediately, eliminating the need for peace officer or Cochrane and Area Humane Society involvement. There are disadvantages as well. Removing licensing would eliminate revenue currently used to offset animal-related services costs, and the municipality would need to identify alternative funding sources to maintain those services. The loss of information used by peace officers in enforcement activities is also a disadvantage. Currently, licensing fees operate on a user pay model that help fund dog park maintenance, offset costs for the dog waste bag program, including the purchase of those bags, distribution, garbage receptacle emptying, that sort of thing. It covers payments to the Cochrane and Area Humane Society for services rendered and helps offset bylaw enforcement costs. The information collected from pet licensing is used by municipal enforcement peace officers for investigation purposes, including pet owner reunification, barking dog complaints, identification of repeat offending dogs reported to be running at large, and aggressive or vicious dog identification, which registration evidence often being required in court proceedings. The information is also used in our emergency management to assist in activation and coordination of the pet management plan in the event of a disaster or emergency. And additionally, development and planning use this information to guide investment decisions for pet infrastructure and identify areas needing additional dog parks. Just wanted to bring to attention that prior to Councillor McFadden's motion being introduced, administration had started planning implementation of a pet licensing software to discover efficiencies. The proposed system includes an online public and internal facing website identical to that currently used by Rocky View County. This would automate current manual processes and significantly decrease animal licensing administration costs. The software would enable residents to register, renew, or cancel licenses online. Additional features include opportunities to introduce reduced fees for tattooed or microchipped animals and multi-year registration options. So, for instance, if you wanted to register your animal for 2 or 3 years at a time, we can introduce a reduced rate for people wanting to do that. The software also allows the opportunity to introduce reduced or eliminate fees for elderly or low-income individuals. Renewal notices would be automatically generated and sent to owners, and payment can be reviewed and received online. We estimate that implementing the new software will decrease overall administration costs for animal licensing by approximately 50%. That concludes this presentation. Thank you all for your time. Administration respectfully requests direction on retaining or removing the current animal licensing requirement and is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Juden. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I would move option 1, that council receive this report for information. And the reason that I support this is, it wasn't necessarily highlighted in your presentation, but this council in some ways has talked a lot about user pay. And I think in many ways, if our community, and in fact, I don't think they are, they're demanding more dog parks, right? If we're demanding the dog parks that we currently have and the need for more dog parks, we probably should be going the other way. I think we should be increasing the licensing fee for pets in a user pay. And I speak as a dog owner. I have no problem in being able to pay my share of what I believe we need in the way of services for dog owners. So I'm in support of option one.
So you're just suggesting we accept the report as information?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and I have to admit the report was kind of halfway what I was hoping it would be. Because I feel before council really gives direction, that we need to understand not only the revenue that's generated, which I think you identified for forecasting about 155,000, right? But what I've always been unable to understand, except from passing conversations, what's the true cost of providing the licensing service, right? Because it's the staff time, it's the tag, it's the mail out, at one time we were operating this off of an Excel spreadsheet. It's the time that staff put in to do excellent customer service, to call people up, to remind them to do this. How many people are actually licensing their dogs? I mean, I've never seen anybody check that. So before we could kind of say, animal licensing is going to offset costs and provide revenue to help us pay for, contributing to dogs parks or doggy bags or all of the things, what is the true cost of the service that we're providing, and then what value is it?
And through the mayor to Councillor McFadden, I can provide some numbers to you. The total cost involving information services, financial services, the mail services, community service representatives, municipal enforcement, the waste bags, Cochrane and Erie Humane Society, and our communications section for the year total around $114,545. That's based on hours collected from each section of the municipality. So they provided those numbers to me, and then we extrapolated them out to that. If we were to move to a software, that number drops to around $58,534, which is about a 50%, 51% savings.
Right.
If we went with no licensing, we actually would drop that down to $47,313, which is a 62% savings over what we are currently spending.
So sorry, and these numbers I didn't see them when I scanned these numbers. Were they in here and I just missed them?
No, they weren't.
Okay. So you're saying, so currently the expenses is 114.
Through the mayor to Councillor McFadden, yes, that's correct.
So currently, we're 40 grand ahead. So that's pretty good.
So sorry, pardon me?
We're roughly 40 grand ahead. If the
Yes.
costs are 155 revenue is 155 and 114 is the cost, which is great. And then you're saying if we move ahead with a pet licensing service, we would cut that down to, I think you said 70 or something.
Around 58,000, which is almost 50% of
50.
that.
And if we don't do pet licensing, we don't go get a software program, we just say, people register your pets, you're responsible, we'll still have an animal bylaw, all the things, what would that total cost then be?
$47,313.
Right, so we'd be able to save about $100,000 in taxes, because my challenge with the current, and I really appreciate these numbers, and that's what I was hoping to get out of the information back in a written form, was we're spending that much money, but not everybody registers their pets, so to be saying that we're using that, I'm dubious about. And it's not really a resource that people are relying on to get their pet back. People use the tag, they have different tags, they chip their animals, they tattoo their animals, all those pieces. So yeah, I still see that there's a savings of $100,000, and it would simplify people's pet ownership. My other question then, though, because I've done a lot of research in this space, what animal licensing software are you looking at?
It's through MFR, which is a GIS-based software company that provides these types of services for multiple municipalities.
MFR. Okay, I'll have to have a look, because the last time I did some research, they weren't a player in the space. So, so I appreciate the report. I still think that we're not getting enough value out of the service, and I would argue that we should just, maintain an animal bylaw for all those purposes, but that requiring people to have a municipal dog tag is not really adding value. So that's my take on it.
Counselor Flowers?
Not really clear on how the service changes, but I do know we need to track how many dogs we got. And one thing I like about the licensing is it encourages people to get their animals neutered, because they have to pay more if they don't. I know when I got my dog, I quickly got that done because it was cheaper. We have so many problems in the community. Whatever is the best way to track them and find out where the nasty dogs are living, and making sure that people look after them properly. I just can't really see it going away. And then the crisis situation you talked about was something I hadn't thought about either. So I just like to keep the status quo.
Counselor Federico?
Quick question. So I'm just kind of wondering too, is the software a $58,000 cost? I'm just wondering, what is the software costing us?
Software cost is $4,500 a year in licensing.
Okay. And I was gonna have one more question. I know that it says that the revenue goes to support dog parks, that kind of stuff, but I thought it went into general reserves, did it not?
It does. That money is then also used to help pay for maintenance of dog parks.
I can help clarify. So the revenue currently is reflected in the municipal enforcement budget. So that $155,000 that is budgeted for 2025 is revenue that offsets the cost of municipal enforcement. So you would see that in that section.
So then if it's going into municipal enforcement, it's not necessarily going into an actual physical space of a dog park. It's going to help enforce municipal enforcement to manage the dog parks?
So there is an interdepartmental transfer that also goes over to the Parks Department for, at least I believe that's how they were doing it. At one point, municipal enforcement was actually acquiring the supplies for the dog parks and then handing them over to parks to go execute, because the revenue was coming into municipal enforcement. I believe we have an interdepartmental transfer that occurs now, so that that department can just go and acquire the funds. But where you see the revenue coming in, it comes into the municipal enforcement budget.
Okay.
And if I may, just to add, while we're talking about the financial implications, and I think Councillor McFadden, just to clarify what I think you had mentioned, is an elimination of the licensing altogether removes the $150,000 of revenue, but leaves approximately $40,000 of cost. So that would be about a 0.5% tax implication to do that. I just want to be clear about the financial implication of moving forward in that direction.
Okay, and I guess maybe another thought is, so the software that comes in, $4,500 a year, there's no stipulation that we have to keep the software for a certain time frame or anything like that. I imagine if we implement it, it's not working, we decide we don't like it, then we move on to just, if that's the next council's choice, then we decide to cancel dog licensing and pet licensing altogether?
Through the mayor to Councilor Federico. Yes, that's correct. We can cancel it at any time. It's a yearly fee that's paid, but if we wanted to run it for 6 months and cancel it 6 months later, we would be able to do that.
I think that would be kind of my preferred way to go. I understand Councillor McFadden's concerns as to, paying it out, what are we getting back? I understand all that, but I think right now, I would like to see what the software does do. And if it's something that removes a lot of costs and a lot of barriers, then, move on. But if it's not working, then next council can take another look at it and decide what they would like to do and how they would like to proceed. I think that's the best path forward for right now.
Councillor McFadden, back to you.
No, thank you. Part of the conversations we were having is how we're setting the licensing fees. And so you would, in this report, you had shared the cost, like for an intact dog, all the costs there. How are we setting those costs? Because I'm just having a quick look at Rocky View counties, and they're like, it's $20 for an intact dog, $15 for a sprayed neuter dog, 10 for replacement tags. When we're looking at how we're setting our pet licensing cost, or we're just looking at what like-sized municipalities are doing, or how are we picking our number?
Through the mayor to Councillor McFadden, so these would have been set in the bylaw in 2016, so I'm not sure exactly how those numbers were determined at that time. I do know that doing a benchmark with other municipalities, some are higher, some are lower.
Ms. Lowe has a
From where we currently are.
supplementary comment.
If I could help, at the time the bylaw that was reviewed, we circulated questions to a number of municipalities requesting their total call volumes, their total number of animals in their community, and what their associated licensing fees were, so that we could take it into consideration, not just based on like-sized communities, but like-sized communities that are also, and take into consideration the number of calls that municipal enforcement gets about animals in our community. And then how they were also, we also looked at Calgary's, because we were dealing with a number of dangerous dog situations at the time, and we were trying to update the bylaw to ensure that we were appropriately addressing those concerns. So we did look to City of Calgary as experts in the area on handling those types of files, given the nature of our growing community, and got some assistance from them as well through the review of the bylaw. But the charges themselves were all established by reviewing other communities with similar numbers of animals and similar call volumes.
Okay, yeah, and that's kind of how I remember it being positioned at the time as well, so thank you for that.
Okay, I agree with the software approach. Question for administration, you don't need a motion from us to go on with that. That's going to happen if we accept this as information. That was something you were going to do anyways? Yeah, okay. Just wanted to be clear that we didn't need that in the motion I didn't think so, but okay. Yeah, for all the reasons, I think the difference between, and for me, it actually comes down to, I think we're going to achieve a lot of what you were looking for, Councillor McFadden, in a reduction of cost through the software, but this also maintains a revenue stream. So I think for me, that offsets the cost of some of the supplements that we supply and all of the bags, I guess is really what I'm talking about. But anyways, I like to see that user pay model at least offset some of those costs, and that would be accommodated through this. That's generated another question from you?
No, it was just, because the last time I was looking at our website, we were identifying, what does your pet licenses support? And I think a lot of people make assumptions that it is going into like buying up parks stuff. I think we should clean up our language about what the $155,000 in revenue actually does contribute to, because I think I was certainly making an assumption that perhaps it was more broadly than that, but without knowing the expenses and the cost, it was hard to know. So I appreciate where you're going, for sure. I just, if we could tighten up the language about what the revenue is actually contributing to, would be great.
I see some nods, but okay. Let's not belabor this. Call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you, Mr. Juden.
Thank you.
Quarterly financial update, 5D. Mr. Alim.
If I may, Mr. Chair, would it be okay to request a 5-minute
Yep.
bio break before
I
we
was,
jumped into the
actually-
financial reporting?
I was thinking about that and then forgot about it. So yes,
I
let's come back
appreciate
at
your enthusiasm for
8
the next
PM.
order of business. But
Sorry, Mr. Alim, making you get some extra steps in. Okay, I think we're streaming again. Mr. Alim, thank you for indulging our 5-minute break. Please proceed with the quarterly financial update.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My first presentation is on the 2025 first quarter financial report. We'll first look at operations tonight. So first, I'd like to point out the 2025 operating budget is $96.3 million as approved by Council December of 2024. Typically in the first quarter, there isn't much activity due to the cold weather, unless it's snow removal. For the tax-supported budget, the net budget cost is $40.4 billion, while the actual net cost is $8.3 million. This represents roughly 20% actual to budget comparison. As a rule of thumb, the actual compared to budget for a first quarter should be 25%, assuming all expenses are incurred uniformly throughout the year. So each quarter, of course, is 25%. So first quarter is 25, 6 months 50, 9 months will be 75, and of course, at the end of the year, 100%. However, some expenses are cyclical, such as snow removal, grass cutting, and maintenance, which are incurred during a specific time of the year, and this will tend to skew the variance presented. The two areas that were higher than 24% are corporate services and community partners. For corporate services, key variances for revenue were the ATCO and Fortis franchise fees. They were higher due to an increase in consumption during the winter months. And second, assessment inspection fee was 49% of budget, and this was due to higher than usual volume of building permits issued in the first quarter. For community services, the request was made to pay the annual grant for the library in the first quarter, and that was roughly $1.2 million. Previously, that grant was paid on a quarterly basis. For the rates supported budget, since utilities are operated as a self-supporting budget, meaning the budget net cost is zero, I decided to use actual expenses to budget to use as a comparator. So budget expenses are $26.9 million, and the actual expenses for the first quarter are $3.7 million. This represents 14% of actual to budget. Overall, total budget, which is the tax and rate supported, actual to budget variance is 15%. You will notice there is no forecast to December 31st provided at this time due to only 3 months of data available, which is inadequate to form a realistic forecast. So I'm going to pause to see if council has any questions on the operations.
May I suggest that we just proceed with the presentation and then get all the questions at the end? Sometimes those questions can take us away.
Thank you for saving us, Mr. Dericotte.
No problem.
Yeah.
So for capital, the approved 2025 capital is $85.5 million, and that is the first column, and it's highlighted for council. Budget adjustment are amounts approved by council to be added as new or to an existing capital project. In this instant, the $970,000 is what council approved which is in addition to the workspace optimization project, which was budgeted in 2025. Budget carryover represents capital projects that were approved in previous years' budgets but not completed as at December 31st, 2024. The total budget carryover into 2025 is $147.2 million. So if you take the 2025 budget column plus the adjustment and the carryover, the total capital budget is $233.6 million. Total actual life to date represents actual costs incurred from previous years' capital projects that were carried over but not complete, as I mentioned earlier, as of December 31st, 2024, plus you add the costs incurred for the current year's budget. That total is $107.5 million. Of the $107.5 million spent to date, only $290,000 is for 2025 capital projects. Actual to budget variance represents the unspent budget as at March 31st, 2025. And that is $126.1 million. As of March 31st, 2025, no projects were completed. The recommendation tonight is that council accepts the report as information and provides administration with any applicable feedback.
Okay, thank you. Council, questions? Councilor Reid?
Thanks, Alvin, for the update. Can you provide a little more clarity and color to the paragraph entitled, excuse me, capital reporting? Specifically, you use the term life to date in relation to capital projects. I'm just wondering, for the general public, if you could explain that. What I think it is that it's projects that are currently in progress, but you're the accountant, and I think the community would like to hear from you.
No problem. I'll just repeat the question, the answer I mentioned before. So the total actual life to date, it represents all the actual costs that have been incurred from previous year's projects that were approved by council, but haven't been completed as of December 31st, 2024. So in other words, they were carried over. So you take that total cost plus what we've spent so far on 2025's approved capital, that gives you the total life to date.
So to be clear then, they're projects that are multi-year that aren't completed and still have subsequent costs to come, right?
They may not be multi-year. They probably just weren't completed at the end of a previous year.
Okay, thank you.
There's a combination.
Great, thank you.
Is there a motion in there, Councilor Reid?
Yes.
To accept as information? Okay, thank you. So moved by Councilor Reid. Councilor Federico?
Yeah, actually, I have, actually, I don't think it's my light, is it? Oh,
Yep,
it is,
yep.
okay, sorry. Thanks for all the information. I do have quite a few questions for you, so I'm just gonna go through and read them as I have them. Council will generate 25K in revenue. What would council be generating revenue for?
The Mayor, to Councilor Federico, that actually is a draw from a reserve, and that is for the, if I'm not mistaken, it's for the,
I can help.
yeah, go ahead.
The revenue draw, or the reserve draw is for the 2025 local election.
Okay, thank you for that one. Next one is, there's a fire engine in it that shows a $1.25 million budget. The 2022 budget shows a $1 million budget. Considering that this was supposed to be a project completed in a couple years, are there any, due to tariffs and due to delay, will there be an increased cost due to tariffs now because of a project's delayed?
The Mayor, to Councilor Federico, I actually was in discussion with Mr. Juden, and we have a fixed price on that equipment. There is no effect on from the tariffs.
Perfect. The North Arterial to Bridge has a $43.8 million budget. Can you tell me when this was approved? Which North
project?
Arterial to the Bridge. And these might be some that you might have to get back to me.
I can get you some additional information on that, Councilor Federico, but I believe that's the work that was in 2016, 2017, the North Arterial that goes down to the rec center currently. So that's one of the first projects when I got to the organization that we worked on.
Okay. And then the station construction monument budget is $6.2 million. Can you place the validation of the budget amount, since none of the budgets include an amount for that exact amount for the station construction monument?
The Mayor, to Councilor Federico, I don't have that information, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I would kind of get at, and I think this has been brought up before, when it comes to capital projects, if we can kind of get them broken down into categories completed, not started, in progress, I think it would be helpful, and I think that's what Councilor Reid was kind of getting at as well, just so that we can kind of see the flow of things. And I think it has been, I think we've had iterations done in other reports, so maybe if we can just make it consistent across the board, it'd be easier to track.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Noted.
That's all I have.
Councilor McFadden?
Yeah, I'd also identified the station construction monument. I think it's just a typo of 62,000 versus 70,000 as opposed to 6 million, but there you go. My questions were more about any of the ones that were over budget. I think you just answered Councillor Federico there, but the Center 1A intersection widening design is just about 10% over budget, and I'm losing track of this next one. Center Ave to 1A improvement is 8% over budget. Oh, this is an interesting one. Sorry, I'm going blind. There's something that's 244% of actual to budget. Could you just speak to the variances in the, I think that's under the roads and parks section?
The Mayor to Councilor McFadden, unfortunately, I did not bring my notes with me, explain those variances, but I have no problem sending those explanations to council for your information.
Yep. Yeah, that would be great. I think there's just yeah, I would always just like, anytime there's a variance or we've exceeded 100%, you know, give us the update of where those are at, and then, yeah, just a typo on the really expensive art would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, call the question. Councillor Reed's motion to accept his information. All in favor? That carries. 5, what are we on, D? E, one of those. 2026 budget and draft principles and process. E.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My next presentation is on the 2026 budget principles and process. So just briefly, talk a bit about the budget process. The budget process is made up of key aspects that are used to create the draft budget. First, to start off with Council's strategic priorities, which sets the foundation of the budget. The budget survey is used to solicit feedback from our residents as to what is important to them and what should be included in the budget. Budget principles and considerations will be discussed in detail this evening, and the capital priorities are used to plan the capital expenditures that will support growth and level of service. So what are the purposes of the budget principles? Well, as I mentioned before, the principles support Council's strategic priorities, which I mentioned is the foundation of the budget. Second, it helps create a realistic budget by ensuring all sources of revenue and expenses are included. It helps to prioritize needs versus wants, and this ensures funding is adequately allocated to essential programs and services before discretionary spending. And fourth, it helps to set financial goals. So what factors were used to set the principles for 2026? There's 4 of them. Administration took feedback from the 2025 Spring Council Strategic Session. We also used, of course, the 2022 to 2025 Council Strategic Plan. We've also considered the upcoming municipal election this fall, and of course, economic uncertainty, mainly or specifically to the U.S. tariffs. So for 2026, there are 3 budget principles. First one is implementing a fiscal framework. Second one is passing the baton. And third is infrastructure life cycle management. So principle 1, implementing a fiscal framework. In 2025, the town began work on the fiscal framework. The 3 areas that were reviewed were reserve policy and strategy, investment policy, and debt policy. These 3 will be presented to the new council in the first quarter of 2026. The key objectives identified are the next areas for development and implementation, and they are alternative revenues, user fees and charges, and tax and assessment. Oops, sorry. Principle 2, passing the baton. Principle 2, passing the baton, focuses on setting the stage for the new council to be successful during their 4-year term. The key objectives: sustainable approach to revenue generation. This ties in with the fiscal framework that I mentioned earlier from Principle 1. A firm financial foundation. This refers to maintaining a positive cash flow, adequate reserves, and debt management. And third, ensuring a healthy and productive organization. This entails having a positive work environment, strong leadership, clear goals, and communication. The third principle, infrastructure lifecycle management. In 2025, the town will be adding a resource to move asset management forward. For 2026, the key objectives for asset management is to develop and implement an asset management policy and plan. The asset management plan will be key in maintaining a functional 10-year capital program. Before council is the 2026 budget timeline. It contains important dates for the 2026 budget. Of importance are dates such as July 7th. This is the COW. The administration will be presenting the results from the budget survey. October 31st to November 1st. This is the public forum the administration will use to present the draft 2026 budget to residents. The timeline does take into consideration additional time required for the new council to get familiar with the budget before deliberations. Deliberations are scheduled to be November 19th, 20th, 26th, and 27th. And December 1st will be the committee of the whole. This is to review the final budget before it's brought to council for approval, and approval is set for December 8th. So the recommendation tonight is that council approves the 2026 budget process as presented. Any questions?
Thank you. Looks like Councilor McFadden has one.
I never have just one question. It's hopeful, but thank you. So I am just going through, well, first of all, I wanted to check, one of the gaps I really felt we had in last year's budget process was a reserve contribution policy, and I wanted to check the status of that.
So the mayor to Councilor McFadden, as I mentioned earlier, the reserve policy, that's part of the fiscal framework, and that will be brought back to council in the first quarter of 2026. It's been taking longer than anticipated to formulate a policy and a strategy for our reserves.
That's really unfortunate because it's been a gap. Is there any way that we can speed that up in time to be a key aspect of this budget?
It is possible.
I can help.
Ms. Lowe?
It's certainly not for lack of it being a priority. Currently, we have a draft of the investment policy, which is waiting for my review. And there's a lot of work going on in that department, not the least of which is incorporating new people into the organization. So council may recall that we have the new position for the manager of financial reporting that's just been added. And so in the absence of those positions and with some vacancies that we've been managing, the team has been doing the best that they can to continue to advance the additional priorities that have been placed on them. But it's just taking a little bit longer because of those vacancies. It's still a priority for us to get it done this year if we possibly can, so that it can be reflected in the budget. It's not looking like we're going to be successful. Simply part of that is we have a new council, the election, and so there's some start over and some of that, so we're not sure we're going to get it adopted ahead of the budget. But if there is a way to have that in front of this council ahead of time, certainly that would be our prerogative as well.
If I may just add a little bit to that as well, thank you, Ms. Lowe, for that. I think Councillor McFadden, two thoughts. One is, please don't take that as a strategic approach to reserves won't be taken in the creation of the budget process. We certainly will do that. It just wouldn't be guided by a specific council endorsed policy. And to Ms. Lowe's perspective, I think some of how in depth or how impactful a new reserve approach might be in this budget process may in some part be contingent on the outcome of the election. For example, if we ended up with 6 or 7 new folks around the table, that may take us longer for them to understand the budget process and some of those implications as part of it, versus if we had a large number of council members return, we may be able to move forward in that process quicker as well. We are as anxious, I think, as council is to see progress made on that. I think there is a gap there, and that it's, as Ms. Lowe said, certainly not because it hasn't been prioritized.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly a priority to me, that we have something built into the budget and some sort of philosophy guiding how we're building that. It was a missed opportunity last year, in my opinion. I do see some changes, speaking next to the questions around the budget schedule. Okay, so we're looking to have, let's see, new council, orientation happens. Oh, yes. So the goal is the end of October, the regular council meeting. The budget document would be presented to council. How, in recent years, I'm not a fan of what we've done in recent years, where it's kind of been, here's the information, good luck. Is the expectation that in this presentation to council that it would be more in depth?
So council may recall, we did take that feedback. We did try to expand on that this year, certainly, but absolutely with the new council, the introduction of the budget document to them will look very different than what this council has experienced in the last 6 years.
Okay, so you might be looking at like an hour plus presentation on how a budget, like a meaningful introduction, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Through the chair to Councillor McGunn, I'm not certain that the presentation of the budget document itself would incorporate all of that information on how the budget process works. That may be part of the council orientation ahead of the presentation of the budget or throughout the process. But we are anticipating a more comprehensive introduction of the budget process, the budget, administratively drafted budget as we present it to the new council. With the new council, that process always looks a little bit more comprehensive than what you may have experienced of late.
Okay, and then also then you've scheduled 2 days for a public forum. Administration presents the budget for 2 days. What is that intended to look like?
So those 2 days are they're placeholders, and usually it's over a weekend, and there's some engagement. In addition, what you're not seeing on the timetable, but what was incorporated into the report, was this year there was a focus group set up as well that was undertaken. So that should be incorporated in here as well, because there'll be a loop back with that group as in addition to the public engagement. But what the specifics around that public forum, we're talking about that actively right now around what is the best opportunity for that type of engagement and where we'll get the most out of that, not necessarily to look exactly like it has in previous years.
Certainly in my time at council, there's been various iterations of what that looks like. So is the intent then that it would be members of the administration presenting this information in a public forum, or would members of councils participate in that? What's the vision?
If I may, through the chair, generally speaking, at this stage, this has been a part of administration introducing the draft budget. So to council at the council meeting as suggested, but then to the community through this process. So at that stage, we again received some feedback from council that there was some discomfort with this idea of council standing in front of a budget that they had not had any input into creation at that stage. And so the main intent of that part of the process would be to inform the public about what the draft budget looks like, and to ensure that that has public visibility prior to council going through deliberations.
Okay. And then the outreach group you've mentioned will also get a chance to have a look and make a report back in a public sphere about what their take is, or what's?
The feedback that we get from the focus group would be included in the budget presentation to council.
Okay. And then, okay, that's evolving. Now I'm looking at the proposed budget dates. Again, kind of spread over 2 days over 2 weeks, looks like, through the end of November. Again, I'm assuming these are still meant to be day meetings. Confirming that, yes? Okay. I do really want to advocate to moving to Leduc's model. I was just looking at their schedule of what they did last year. They haven't posted what they're doing in they haven't posted what they're doing in 25 yet. But what they do is they hold them in the meeting in their regular scheduled council times. For that, they also allow public members and public organizations to present and ask questions of the budget during the evening. So I would really like us to take a pause on this and have a look at what the November budget presentation, and to allow that, because I am a big fan of the Leduc model for that. So that's my feedback on that. And then the rest of the dates make sense to me, but I would really like us to move to council deliberations occurring over either during the evenings or during council times through November, and really allowing and open the opportunity for public members to ask questions through that process.
Councilor Federico.
Thanks. I think my biggest concern is just, council just becomes elected on October 20th, and we're handing them a huge pile of paperwork 1 week later, and expecting them then to basically go through the process, which is arduous at best for us who have been sitting in our chairs for 8+ years, right? What is a repercussion if we were to delay not passing this budget prior to January 1st of 2026?
The Mayor, to Councilor Federico, the ramifications is that if council does not approve a budget prior to the end of the year, there would be an interim budget that will come before council in January, until such time where council would adopt a budget for 2026.
And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not looking to hold off the process. However, I think to Councillor McFadden's point, I mean, I understand the days are kind of all laid out here. Administration has booked off the time. Like, everybody's got lives and things going on. However, it's a lot to take in for a first-time council member who's just going through orientation 2 days before getting handed the document. I would like to see some nighttime conversation maybe built in somewhere, and maybe it's shortening some of these dates and then adding in some nighttime stuff. Even if it's, there's special meetings anyways, so maybe just adding in some nighttime stuff, just to break it down and move a little slower through the process. I think that we've got to be cognizant that there probably is going to be a few new people sitting around this bench, and to dump this on them is concerning to me. And not that I'm, like I said, not that I'm looking to hold off on the approval of the budget, but if it happened that perhaps they needed more time, then I'd rather get it right and delay the approval and just set up an interim budget to grant them that, maybe it's 2 to 3 extra weeks for them to feel comfortable. That would be how I would like to look at it, rather than, kind of set in stone and this is it. And I do like the idea of having some public feedback, an opportunity for maybe public feedback, as well as for the new council that'll be approving this next budget. Just my thoughts.
Councilor McFadden, back to you.
Thank you. I did just want to do a temperature check with the group. Is there an appetite for having some budget discussions in the evening as opposed to all through the day?
Well, I can weigh in. I don't see any other lights. I think we're getting bogged down in, and I appreciate the feedback. I think doing status quo all the time isn't always the answer. So having some ideas and thoughts put out there, I think is a good thing. We can sit here and suggest whatever we want to the next council. The next council will set their own cadence, their own meeting schedule. If they want more time, I appreciate where you're going, Councilor Federico. If there's a brand new council, but they can also, they'll be sitting here, they can change the dates and they can set the evenings or daytimes. My perspective is we don't make our best decisions at night, generally tagged on to another meeting or all of business. I prefer them during the day. It's one of the things in the candidate guide now, and it's, quite frankly, it's part of the job. And I wouldn't look at this as being dumped on the new council. I think if I'm hoping the next council is excited to receive this and dig into these types of materials, and it's really part of the job. It's a big part of this job. So I think for me, setting aside times during the day for budget is important. It speaks to the importance of the document, and setting aside our days just to work through that. Is that a end-all be-all? Would I be open to some evening mix into that? Sure, but I think having a set time for budget is important from my point of view. So I'm kind of shying away from that, but I'm also saying at the same time that I think we're talking about something, we're just kind of setting up administration for a guideline for the next council on October, whatever date, 30th, they can come in and set a whole new date. So it's kind of semantics here today.
All right, well, so I disagree. I think we all know the power of schedules. And if it's booked and it's just said you're gonna do this, we're locking people into an old pattern. So if, yeah, so I disagree with that approach, especially if you have a new council. To show up, they'll do the orientation, and if we don't set up an alternate schedule for them now, I'm sure there'll be pushback on being able to book things and advertise things and all the processes. So I just respectfully disagree on that.
I don't think we actually have a motion on the floor, so. Councilor Fideko?
Maybe to Councilor McFadden's point, is there possible to have maybe like a couple of options? I get what you're saying, that it's really not up to us to change it, they have time, but really, like, when do they have time? Like, you're just elected, you're going through orientation like that, you only have like a week and a half, right? Like, it's pretty tight, so I don't know, maybe if there's another option to be able to provide councilors with, then maybe it could be just so that they know we are thinking about that, or maybe there could just be a note in the election package that says these dates and times are subject to change depending on who was elected, then maybe that kind of supersedes everything. You don't have to make an actual change into the schedule, but just allows them.
If I could, just for the assistance for this evening, all we are asking council to do is to approve the timeline as presented as a starting point. If you want additional days, those can certainly be added, and the dates identified are currently, yes, they are held right now, but you are not approving times right now. All you are doing is approving the general course of the budget process and what that will look like. All of these dates are always subject to change by direction from council and through resolution of council.
Councilor McFadden?
I appreciate that. And just a last thought, for the orientation, I would actually suggest that for the new council orientation, and in recent years, we've relied on our own staff for that. But since the new council is going to be relying on our current staff moving ahead, that the new council orientation be led by like an external facilitator to kind of bring an outside lens to things as a starting point. So I just wanted to suggest that as a possible tool for the new.
Councilor Reid?
I'll move option one.
Okay. Option one, council approves the 2026 budget process as presented. Okay. See any other lights on? I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. F is budget considerations, 2026.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So my third presentation is on the 2026 budget considerations. So budget considerations, their purpose. So budget considerations set parameters to ensure council's strategic priorities are preserved, and they also provide reasonable assurance the budget is realistic and accurate by ensuring consistency with the information and data used to create the budget. Any deviations and exceptions are noted and discussed during the budget process. So the first consideration is assessment. Property assessment is the source of municipal taxes, which account for 42% of total revenue. Based on this graph, so taxable assessment in 2019 was $5.6 billion. For 2020-25, it is $8.8 billion. That's an increase of 57% over 7 years. The average assessment growth over this period is 3 years. Sorry, is 3%. So in September, the forecast assessment growth will be available, and at that point, the revenue for taxation will be updated at that point in time. However, based on the building permits issued so far in 2025, it is anticipated that growth in 2026 will be in the range of 3.5% to 4%. With respect to energy costs, the town has secured with Capital Power from a contract that runs from January 1, 2024 to December 31st, 2026. The new contract is a load following contract at a fixed price of $52.75 per megawatt hour for the entire term. Based on the price that I've looked at, without this contract, we would have been looking at roughly a fixed rate of $66.42. So the town has actually done very well in locking in this fixed contract. So just for interest, in the 2025 budget, energy costs account for 38%, or $2.3 million of the $6.2 million budget for material goods and supplies. It is a significant expense to the town. With respect to provincial funding, the current police, the only thing that I like to mention is the current policing grant expired March 31st of this year, but it is anticipated that it'll be renewed at the same grant amount for 2026. With respect to the LGFF from the government of Alberta, Family and Community Support Services, the Community Resource Center and Family Resource Network, those grants are pretty much will be held at the 2025 level with minor increase from 2025. With respect to the level of service, administration will be maintaining the same level as 2025. However, should council wish to add a new service or program to the 2026 budget, a new funding resource or a new funding source will need to be identified at that time. Inflation. So this graph shows actual inflation since January 2023, where it was 5.8%, and it currently sits at around 2.3%. There was a slight increase in the first quarter of 2023 due to the expiration of the GST holiday. If you recall, there was a GST holiday, and it ceased in February of this year. So with the U.S. moving ahead with tariffs to Canadian goods and supplies, it is creating a considerable amount of uncertainty in the Canadian economy. The Bank of Canada considered two illustrative scenarios with respect to tariffs. So scenario number one, most tariffs imposed since the trade conflict began are negotiated away, but the process is unpredictable. Uncertainty about trade policy continues until the end of 2026. Under this scenario, global and Canadian growth weaken temporarily. However, with the removal of the carbon tax, inflation will fall roughly below 1.5%, but then it will return to the 2% market. Scenario number two, the uncertainty and limited tariffs in scenario one persist, and other U.S. tariffs are added. A long-lasting global trade war unfolds. So under this scenario, there is a sharp global slowdown and an increase in the inflation factor to 3% by mid-2026 due to Canada experiencing a brief recession, but will return to 2%, to the 2% target. What is common about both scenarios is the target rate of 2% being reached. However, there is no time frame of when that will be reached. So administration is recommending that the town utilize an inflationary rate of 2% for the 2026 operating budget. In terms of expenditures are created using a zero-based budgeting methodology. For where instances where the costs are not known, the budget is developed based on a 3-year historical average of actual, plus minimal growth, and then the 2% inflation is added to that number to come up with the budget for 2026. So the recommendation tonight is that council direct administration to develop the draft 2026 operating budget as outlined in the report as presented. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Alim. Councilor Reid.
Now, I had a couple of questions or comments for you. As soon as my light goes on.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. I'll move option 1. And a comment, basically, in addition to the considerations of inflation at 2% and zero-based budgeting in terms of expenditures, I really like the emphasis on financial stewardship, organizational resiliency, and in particular, the open spaces and natural areas livability. I think that those are the considerations that I appreciate, at least in terms of council moving forward in terms of the 2026 budget. So thank you.
Councilor McFadden.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, can you move back to the slide that showed the inflation predictions? Oh, okay, so it was, yeah, we don't have an inflation. I was just wondering if it might not be a more conservative approach to, instead of saying 2, to build in a buffer of like 2.3 or 2.5, just with the uncertainty on the whole tariff front. 2 seemed optimistic to me.
The mayor to Councilor McFadden. The administration, we actually were considering that. However, with the elimination of the carbon levy, I think that's going to really help with the inflation in Canada. That's why, to me, the 2% is still very conservative, and it'll still give us enough buffer room in terms of putting together our budget for next year.
Okay. May I also, sorry, Councillor McFadden, through the chair, may I also add that I think in terms of preparing the budget at this stage, I think we'd prefer to have a more conservative target and then have to stretch ourselves later in consultation with the elected officials at the table as part of that. I think your point is accurate, as in there's definitely a lot of uncertainty, and you know, a 2% inflationary factor is our best assessment, including what Mr. Alim suggested around the reduction of the carbon tax, and is a fair target. However, anytime we go through the development of the budget, we will learn as to whether or not that's appropriate, and any budget we put in front of council will be using this as a guidepost, but not a prescription.
Okay, all right, yep, fair enough. I was just, the Bank of Canada is aiming for 2%. We live in uncertain times.
Okay, no other feedback?
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add one other thought. I was going to share this earlier. Is I just want to note as well that this maintains the commitment that administration has made in relation to feedback from council on that growth plus inflation target for our general kind of approach to our fiscal performance. And again, do feel that that represents a responsible and consistent approach to our municipal finances. Have appreciated in the past council's feedback on that, and has taken a lot of work over the last number of years to get to a place where we are now consistently and comfortably proposing growth plus inflation budgets. Obviously, also reflective of service-related questions that come up during the budget process.
Councillor McFadden.
Sorry, just another passing thought on the whole budget process. I think just for your public communications, and even for myself, so when we're saying growth, can we always just be explicit whether we're talking about population growth or assessment growth? Because often, and I've had this conversation many times with folks, they're like, what, you were forecasting that the growth was only going to be 4 and it was this. And I'm like, no, I was talking about the assessment growth. So if we can be explicit in any budget conversations, whether we're talking assessment growth plus 2% or population growth plus 2%, I think would help people understand our processes a little bit better.
Just a final comment. I appreciate the approach administration's taking. I think I like the level of conservatism and I did read into the growth plus inflation approach. I think it's a good one. I appreciate the report tonight. Okay, call the question. All in favor of the process or the budget considerations? Thank you. Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aleem. That moves to 6 notices of motion. We have a couple. Councillor Wilson, you're 6A.
I'm 6A, okay. My notice of motion is withdrawal from the ICLEI and PCP programs. It's a bit of a mouthful, the recommended action and executive summary. Maybe I won't read through it unless we want to. I'll just save you all because we already read it 2 weeks ago and you can all read it in front of you. I did say that I was referencing a certain website, a KICLEI website today. And so I do have some post-amble thoughts that will answer probably some questions that I imagine you're going to ask as we debate this. And I'll just hit off on those. And so we had an group email to council today, or a couple, pardon me, not today, but to all of council a little while back, saying that municipalities essentially need to be cautious not to abandon their net zero commitments to carefully created conspiracy theories. And I thought I'd bring that up today because I just wanted to at least express myself that I have no intention of doing that. And in fact, this website that I'm quoting from right now, I don't know a whole lot about where it comes from, who they are, what their personal agenda is. All I wanted to say is that my agenda is, as I'll explain here, very well described by them. And I just thought that their words are better than mine. And rather than try and use their words as mine, I just wanted to give them the credit that they deserve. So anyway, another email we just got says, this lack of awareness is not a conspiracy, it's a government issue. The PCP program often enters municipalities with little debate, oversight, or long-term review. Its structure mimics a corporate marketing funnel, free entry, escalating commitments, and no real ability from its sponsors. And while environmental stewardship is essential, it must always reflect the democratic will and priorities of local residents, not international mandates. And that's the email we got in support of my motion. So just to cut to it here, the website that I was going through, the KICLEI, says, and I'll just read through this because it helps completely argue what I'm trying to get to with this motion, which is that many people are familiar with the freemium model, an approach used in mobile apps, cloud storage services, and software subscriptions where the initial product is free, but users soon realize that they need to make continuous payments to unlock full functionality. PCP follows this pattern almost exactly. So you have the free hook. PCP is promoted as a voluntary program with no cost to join, just like free software that appears risk-free at a glance. But then number 2, we enter into data collection as the first step. So municipalities are required to collect emissions data, a time-consuming and costly process requiring smart technology and ongoing monitoring systems. This data is valuable as it includes detailed energy and waste consumption metrics. However, it is handed over to the ICLEI, which refuses to disclose what software it is inputted into or what list of recommendations is outputted to reach net zero and beyond. Commitment to targets and the sunk cost fallacy. So once municipalities set reduction targets, they lock themselves into long-term obligations, like a free trial that transitions into a paid subscription. Withdrawing becomes difficult because councils must justify their past decisions. By the time they reach this stage, municipalities have already spent considerable taxpayer money on data collection, emissions tracking, making it psychologically and politically harder to reverse course despite growing costs. This is the classic sunk cost fallacy where decision makers continue investing in a failing course of action because of prior commitments. So the costly upgrades, PCP provides municipalities with a list of recommended solutions that involve costly investments in new technology such as electric vehicle fleets, green building retrofits, and urban densification policies. Just as users of a freemium app must pay to unlock essential features, municipalities must now fund expensive infrastructure projects. And so the takeaway is it's never truly free. Even after reaching net zero, municipalities are expected to continue spending on carbon credits, carbon capture technology, monitoring systems, compliance measures, ensuring perpetual dependency on climate-related expenditures. And so what the website that I'm referencing recommends is that council demands a full cost breakdown up front. If a program is free, councilors should ask what long-term costs are involved and insist on seeing cost analysis before agreeing on participation. How much have these project costs municipalities over the last 30 years? Number two, be skeptical of programs that require data collection. If an initiative asks for extensive data before revealing its costs, it's likely a long-term commitment disguised as a trial. Number three, consider the exit strategy before signing on. Councilors should assess how easy it is to withdraw if these costs become unmanageable and develop an opt-out plan. And finally, four, prioritize local adaptation over global mitigation. So instead of investing in top-down international net zero frameworks, municipalities should focus on local climate adaptation strategies that bring direct benefits to their communities, so such as flood prevention, infrastructure resilience, and regenerative agriculture. So now, no longer quoting, just in my own words, because I'm about to get this question from the bench, why is this important to Cochrane? Why bring this up now? And so it's important as I'm seeking to wrestle back direct control from externally driven groups that may not have Cochrane's best interests in mind. How could they? They don't know our unique challenges and situation. Again, this issue was brought to my attention at a February delegation to council, and so it's something that I'm just exploring right now. These partnerships that I'm seeking to disentangle ourselves from have already had direct impacts on Cochrane policy and spending. Think taxpayer-funded electric charging stations built. Think near-reality electric bus debacle that Edmonton learned a hard lesson from. Think Green Trip funds. Think Cochrane's 50-year planning document that currently sets us up for financial commitments to net zero policies, which we've never voted for as a council during my 8-year tenure here. So in summary, if we want to vote for and legislate such things, fair enough. All I'm asking is that we bring it to mass Cochrane public attention and know that what we are signing ourselves up for such things, and that this is the will of the electorate and not a freemium subscription we've entered into via some third-party alliance like FCM, which is, as we all know, the Federation for Canadian Municipalities, that doesn't represent Cochrane voters. It's a national interest. And so all I'm looking to do with this notice of motion is make sure that before we sign ourselves up for some of the things that I just talked about above, that we actually have a council discussion about where we're going and why we're doing it. And I guess I can just leave it there and leave it to the floor for debate right now, and we can get into recommended action or executive summary if anyone wants clarity on what I'm asking for.
I think that's the most descriptive notice of motion we have ever had.
Oh, good, I think.
Councillor Reid.
Yeah, Patrick, if I understand the notice of motion is as in the document that we received.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah. So having had the opportunity to be party to this discussion some time back with Councillor Wilson, I'm in support of it and look forward to having this move forward.
Councillor Flowers.
This is too deep for me, but does administration have any comments or recommendations around this?
Thank you to the chair. I think I would just simply say that administration would always endeavor to provide those full cost analysis and those types of things, in particular when subscribing to a program. And I think that's in alignment with Councillor Wilson's intent on this program, highlighting that and in particular around climate related grant programs, et cetera, is certainly noted and helpful, but there's nothing in here that that administration wouldn't be interested in doing in a general sense in any case.
Okay. I was hoping you'd say that. We should always be researching what we're getting into, but I just don't want us to miss any opportunities that would be good for Cochrane.
Councillor Federico.
I was just curious, are there any repercussions for us, I guess, kind of ceasing involvement? Or is it just more of a matter, we can choose to cease right now, but however, we're moving into an election, there's going to be new council, perhaps maybe new council wants to join. Like, is there any repercussions that have on both ceasing and then perhaps next council deciding to join?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I think the answer to this is fairly straightforward, is there is no current active initiatives that would be impacted by this motion, and that any others would be brought forward again with as much and as complete information as administration can gather.
with that, I support this. I'm happy to sit for now. I think it's something that obviously the next council can have further discussions on and decide their future and how they wish to go forward from there.
Councillor McFadden?
So just some clarity. So this is looking to seize our participation in this one program. Where I had a bit of a red flag was on similar externally driven initiatives, unless explicitly mandated. You're not meaning that we're gonna have to have council permission to like stay in FCM or AV munis or I don't know, like the Calgary Airshed Zone, anything like that? That's not your intent?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
For further clarity, unless maybe we should get to the chair before I get, why don't we do the chair first?
I'll weigh in too. I don't have an issue with your second part of your motion. I don't understand, I understand why you're asking us for the first part, but I would like to understand further what the implications could be. And I'm not subscribing that we have all of these, I'm hearing from administration that there's really no active participation in these anyways, but I just wonder about the ripple effects through the environmental side of things. So I was coming into this tonight with maybe a question to put the first part of your motion to our environmental task force for a little bit of research on what this program is, is there any ramifications from pulling out or ripples effect. And one of the things that came to mind was the Municipal Green Fund that is connected to FCM, and I just wonder if there was implications on that. I mean, I just reported back to council on the FCM that I attended where there was, I thought, opportunities for that. Does this now inhibit us from those types of things? So I'm saying yes to number 2, which I think is already a practice our administration is undertaking, but I'm glad to see it in writing. The first part, I think I would ask council to send that maybe to our environmental task force for a recommendation back to council before we make a decision, one way or the other. That's the only twist I was going to add tonight.
Okay, and I'm happy to expose this to any group, including our environmental task force, and see if they have any comments. My goal here was, it was a shock and a surprise to me to learn in February from the delegation before us that we were part of 2 groups that I've never heard discussed around a council table. Maybe it happened before my time. That could be an explanation. But I heard from administration easy enough because we're not active in either of those spaces. And my answer was, then let's formally withdraw and do it publicly. And if we want to rejoin those groups, let's have a public discussion about it, because I've never been part of that discussion. But happy to have our environmental task force look through it as well. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, I don't know what the uptake is on that. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I'd have to think about it, but I think this goes well beyond the environmental task force initiatives. But if you think that there's value in doing that, and Patrick, you'd be willing to come to speak to it, I'd be happy to see us entertain that on that agenda.
Yeah, much like a Cochrane Planning Commission comment on some new building policy.
Yep.
I think that can be within their purview, and I'd be happy to hear what they have to say about it. That'd be great.
Thank you.
So would you work that into your motion, or?
I don't know if I have to, but I'm happy to add into the recommended action before us that before taking action, we'll receive comments from the Cochrane Environmental Task Force about any possible considerations that I haven't considered or the group here hasn't considered before moving forward.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank
Sure.
you,
Yep.
Councillor Wilson. Okay, everybody's clear on the motion? Okay.
Yep.
Date, what about, we haven't considered a date in there. When does the next environmental task force meet? A month, like? We only have another 2 meetings left, I think. But it probably wouldn't be, are we June 23rd? It probably wouldn't make our July meeting, would it?
Yeah, thank you through Chair. I think respectfully, in order to appropriately have the task force give any meaningful feedback, we would be looking at the September.
Yeah. July 15th. Okay, so that's post-council.
So, Mr. Chair, September is a fine date by me. Again, this isn't the whole reason for this was to have a public discussion about it and have a way that we're going to move forward in the future. There's no pressing need to have this brought forward. I already know that administration is not active in these spaces, so I just want to formally acknowledge that we're not and remove ourselves unless that committee has some new news for me that I haven't considered.
Okay. Excuse me, come back to council in September.
Excellent, yes.
Okay. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next notice of motion is Councillor Federico, and you're reading yours in tonight.
Okay, so the recommended action is that council direct administration to release all legal and associated staff costs pertaining to any meetings, investigations, and sanctions brought against me, and that I can resume as deputy mayor from June 26th to October 2025. I have already been reinstated to run as deputy mayor from June 26th to October 2025. I was a little disappointed that I wasn't told earlier. I actually asked to be reinstated, even though I know there's no legal opportunities that I shouldn't be allowed to be able to serve as deputy mayor. Since Bill 50, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act 2025, received royal assent on May 15th, and as a result, all code of conduct bylaw provisions are no longer legally enforceable. And to go back from when these costs that I'm looking for, I would go back to the beginning of 2021. I would like the whole entire term for legal costs to be released.
Okay, thank you. No debate tonight. We're just reading it in. Councillor Reid?
If Councillor Federico would consider, if we're releasing all the costs of this, if we could actually release the documents as well.
I think that would be something we would debate at the
okay.
next. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Get your light on still. No, Councillor Reid. There we go. Okay, so that's notices of motion. Mayor's report, got a short one. I've been surprised at how tired I've been the last couple of weeks, and then I went through what we've been up to as a group. Of course, with the RFP and the mayor's report always clears the gallery. SLS user engagements, calls to seniors on the bow, farmers market, the scuba user group, and minor hockey. Met with all of those. Of course, we all know where that went. The Cochrane High Culture Fest was held a week and a half ago. The Cochrane Immigrant Services Committee really has done some great work there, working Culture Fest into the high school. And Cochrane High did an amazing presentation there. Councillor Flowers, you were there as well. Just all the cultures represented in the high school, and just really well done. Really good energy in that room. I just wanted to recognize Wally Hume with his retirement recently. I think he's been gone a week now, but served 30 years working for this community, and has moved on to retirement. Congratulations to him and his storied career. It was interesting to see somebody I've grown up with really in this community kind of go through the whole process anyways. Retirement for Mr. Hume. Elder Abuse Awareness Day, I think this was the 9th year in a row, or at least 8, where we've planted a lilac at one of the seniors' facilities in Cochrane. This one was out front of the Big Hill Lodge. Had the opportunity with Councillor Flowers and the FCSS group and all of the volunteers to recognize elder abuse in our community. So that work's been ongoing for quite some time, and that initiative's really gaining some traction and doing what it was meant to do, is bring awareness to that. I spoke at the Brielle Thorson fundraiser. That was the Mr. Crawford raising funds for the robotic legs for Brielle. That was a heartfelt, emotional afternoon with the community rallying around that little girl. It was really cool to see Cochrane come together for that, and hats off to Dan Crawford for spearheading that initiative and seeing that thermometer reach the 43,000 that they had set the fundraising goals at. Went from there to Route 22 for their grand opening and 5th year anniversary, and just a bit of a reflection. And I gave some words there on behalf of council, and I think when we look back at the investment that this group made in that particular entity coming out of COVID, and I know we took some flack for that maybe, and some criticism, but that investment now has turned into a success story for that gallery, where they essentially, I learned that evening, they have 95 local artists participating in the gallery. It's a collective, as we heard from that presentation from Ms. Kruger a few nights ago, or weeks ago, I guess. And there's a waiting list now to get in. And also just an excellent addition, I think, to our historic downtown with a gallery like that. But really, the way they coined it was an incubator for local artists, which I thought was pretty cool. Of course, the Rotary Club and Dan Parsmart had Pedaling for Polio. I spoke there at the Rotary Club meeting where they welcomed him back from his 1,600-kilometer ride across Alberta from Northwest Territories all the way to the Montana border to raise awareness and funds for polio. Joined Councillor Wilson at the library board for continued discussions on the need for a new library space and some updates on the library needs assessment. Also spoke at the Cochrane Primary Prevention Workshop with Big Hill Haven, and they welcomed a lot of partners in the region and community partners in primary prevention of domestic violence. That was well attended, and an interesting discussion about getting into the conversation with men and boys at an early stage to help with mental health for men in a prevention sense in domestic violence. We then had Mr. Derricott and I and Reeve Kissel and CAO Regan McCullough, I think is his last name, at Rocky View County. We met with the user groups at the SLS Center, and it was either way, YMCA or RFP, a decision one way or the other. We wanted to close the loop with all of the user groups and had a 2-hour meeting with all of them. It was well attended. I think there was 40 or 50 people in the room, answered some questions on process, and really got into some next steps, and then what is really what some of the questions were around. And then did the same with the SLS board on Friday morning. So it was a 9:30 p.m. Thursday night turnaround, 7 a.m. SLS board meeting on Friday morning to go through, I guess, setting the stage for what the board now has in front of it as next steps. And we're working on a statement, a public statement, to set things, I guess, in a forward direction with staff and our community. And then further, this morning we had an IMC with Rocky View County. I thought was one of our more productive meetings with Rocky View County, talking about our IDP, ICF discussion and setting a timeline for the future of how that will come back to the next council with the terms of reference, and really getting down to the work of this group in the absence of a CMRB now, of really what our local version of a growth plan or land use for our region looks like, at least in the Rocky View sense. So that was a very fruitful conversation. And that brings us to today. So that is my report for today. Happy to hear any council reports. Councilor Reid.
Maybe I'll pick up where you left off in terms of that IMC meeting with Rocky View County. I'm hoping that the rest of council will have access to that PowerPoint presentation that was provided to us at the meeting.
Through the chair, I can certainly reach out to the county and acquire that and ensure you've got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if that could go on the council portal, because I think it's, what I took away from that meeting and was it was extremely encouraging. while it won't necessarily affect this council, it does put in place the footings for the next council in terms of no decisions have been made, but it actually sets the field work up. So there are two documents, the intermunicipal development plan that the mayor referred to and the intermunicipal collaboration framework. The IDP, what's really cool about it is it has all the requirements for transportation, waste management, water management, waste solids, emergency services, recreation, and I think we've added to the list annexation as well. So it was probably the most encouraging, Pat, so maybe we missed you there, it was the most encouraging meeting we've had, believe it or not, with that, with that group on our way out as a council. The other thing I wanted to report on, if I could, was the Natural Environmental Protection Task Force. I'm grateful to my colleague, Councilor Nagel, who wore his jersey but gave up his time to watch the hockey game to be at that meeting. There were the committee or the task force expressed some concerns about the Fire Smart program, and so we've asked the chief to come and attend our next meeting. We also reviewed the assessment of the RFP for the process in terms of what areas we think are a priority. And, excuse me, I hope at some future point, council will be able to get a presentation on the rehabilitation update for on the riverbank in terms of the dog park, because the town is doing some excellent work in that area in terms of rehabilitation as well as the Menaneel Creek. So I won't belabor the evening, but there were two great presentations provided to that task force that I would hope would come to council at some point. So that's my report.
Nice, thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I've just got two on my mind. One, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming to the library board meeting the other day. I could see that it lifted the spirits of everybody just to hear where we are in the RFP, the early RFP process for a new library, and just what the future may hold for the library and all the patrons in Cochrane. It's something that gets talked about almost every meeting, and to hear from, you know, the top of the administrative ladder how we're looking to proceed and how our goals are aligned, I think was very useful to the members. So thank you. And I just wanted to give recognition to a group. I went to their 50th, it was their 50th anniversary Saturday before last. It's the Cochrane Ranchmen, a men's hockey team here in Cochrane. Established 1975, and they actually had a 50-year reunion on the Saturday before last. I got the invite because I'm now a member of the team as of 2024, and it was just cool to see one continuous group continue that long in Cochrane. And I promised them to, I'd show them, show council the logo that everybody wears in their jerseys, the traditional Manavision logo, which must be the coolest logo in all of sports in Cochrane. So just congratulations to the guys, and it was really cool to see, you know, guys that started the team in 1975 that are still there to celebrate with us, and a very cool event to be invited to. That's my report.
All right. Okay, thank you. We do have a couple of closed session items tonight. We need a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Reid, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. Okay, we're back. We need a motion to come out of closed session. Counselor Reid.
I will so move. We come into closed session. And may I move on to,
Those in favor of that motion?
sorry,
Carried. Counselor Reid, you have a motion arising?
that council direct the closed session meeting discussion remain confidential and pursuant of section 29(1) G of the Access to Information Act, and that further and further that council direct administration to proceed with option 1 as presented in the closed session.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion? That carries unanimously, and that concludes our meeting. This council meeting is terminated.